All right, the Krueger Show meets the Cohn Zone. Hope everybody's having a great tax day, right? April 15th. Have you filed your taxes? If you haven't,
I filed my taxes today.
Did you today?
I did.
Good to see.
Quarterly.
Good to hear.
Quarterly. I got to pay in advance. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, nice. Estimates. Let's pay estimates.
Yeah.
The world of content creation and YouTube. It was a little complicated on the tax day for the first time in a while, but you know what? Got through it. Everybody's going to live, and and thanks to you, Grant, for helping me find new revenue streams outside of the radio world. And today, the country thanks you as well.
I do what I can for America. For America, Larry.
Sam got his fair share.
Yeah.
But welcome to the Cohn Zone meets the Krueger Show. Of course, the Krueger Show brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week. Go get the brisket. Say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Krueger sent you. And we're also brought to you by Marin Auto Glass, marinautoglass.com on the web. And our brand new sponsor down on the peninsula, or on the Monterey Peninsula, Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. Call Anthony Catania, 831-521-5264 for all your collectible needs. What's going on, Grant? How's your week going so far?
Phenomenal. Having a phenomenal week. It's only Monday, but so far, sitting here, the Niners haven't done anything yet, and I'm really enjoying things. The draft will be nice. We're speculating about who they're going to take at 31. It'll be nice to talk about who they did take, but for now, I'm an expert.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people that are like, enough of the mock drafts. Let's just get to this thing.
What are you going to do?
You entitled it on your end, wide receiver potentially getting drafted in round 1. Why don't we start right there? I mean, I think, if you look at the Niner depth chart, you got Debo, you got Aiyuk, you got JJ, you got Danny Gray, and he was not involved in that card dispute. Danny, none of it matters if you can't play. So you got to show that you can play. And, there's Tay Martin, there's Chris Conley. They look pretty loaded at wide receiver, but a lot of people think that they will go wide receiver maybe as early as the first round. How do you see it?
Well, it might be the best player available. The Niners don't ever take the best player available in round 1, which might be why they don't always do so well, although they did with Nick Bosa, let's say that. But they're usually looking for a need for a specific position. This year, it could match up at wide receiver, like Adonai Mitchell, Ladd McConkey. It seems like there's a bunch of wide receivers projected to get taken at the end of round 1. And not just to replace Brandon Aiyuk if they trade him, but Juwan Jennings is going to be gone in a year. Debo could be gone in a year if they want to save about $10 million in cap space. It could help to draft a wide receiver. And they seem like there's some guys who run 4.3s that could be available.
Well, wide receiver, there's one of every kind, right? There's tall, there's short, there's slow, there's fast, there's slot receivers, there's outside receivers. There's just all, if you want a receiver, man, you're going to be able to find one in this draft. Harrison, Neighbors, Adunze, probably Brian Thomas Jr. are all gone, most likely. They're all projected to go, top 20, top 25, Niners pick 31. That next group, I'll list you the next 5 or 6 guys. You tell me if you like which guy you like here. Troy Franklin from Oregon, Ladd McConkey from Georgia, Adonai Mitchell from Texas, Xavier Worthy, who ran the 4.21 at about 160 pounds from Texas, Keon Coleman from Florida State, Xavier Legette from South Carolina, Roman Wilson from Michigan, Ricky Pearsall from Florida, and Malachi Corley. That's kind of that next group from Western Kentucky. What do you think? Are any of those guys in your mind worthy of the Niners using their first on?
I like Adonai Mitchell from Texas, about 6'2", runs a 4.3. It looks like he has a lot of the tools that Aiyuk has, the ability to beat press coverage, the ability to go over the middle, and the ability to win deep. And frankly, he's faster than Brandon Aiyuk. You got to remember, the Niners drafted Brandon Aiyuk for Jimmy, and they took him in the draft right after Jimmy missed the long throw to Emmanuel Sanders. And Brandon Ayuk's a really good player, but as a deep threat, there are guys who are faster. And Brock Purdy's a whole different kind of quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. He's not afraid to throw the ball deep. He doesn't have the strongest arm, but you don't have to have velocity to throw deep. So I like Adonai Mitchell. Who do you like?
I love him too. I think, I just watched the draft featured the other night on him, and he was at Georgia. I always wondered, why did he transfer from Georgia after winning a couple national championships to Texas? and it's because he's got a little girl who lives in Texas, and he's in love with his daughter, and he wanted to spend more time with her. So even though he won 2 national championships, he's like, "Get me to Texas." I can, I'm a family guy with 4 kids, so I can kind of admire the athlete that wants to be, doesn't want to have a long distance relationship with his children. So that I think that was kind of cool. I love his game. I like Adonai Mitchell a lot more than Xavier Worthy, who ran that great 40 time. He's just bigger. He's fast. He's also fast. He runs in the 4.3s, not in the 4.2, but in the 4.3s, and that's plenty fast, as you said. And I think he's also 6'3". So Adonai Mitchell would be one of my favorites. I also like Xavier Legette. He's only a 1-year guy. He didn't have a great career at South Carolina, but 6'3", 230, and watching the way he runs away from people, and also watching the way, Grant, he runs in the middle of the field makes me think he would be a perfect Niner, because they love those middle of the field guys, and Legette runs with, courageousness across the middle because he's 230 and he's not really afraid of getting hit. So
I'll
those
never
are the 2
forget
guys I kind of like.
they drafted Dante Pettis. And Dante Pettis on film coming out of Washington could do a lot of really cool stuff. Really good route runner, could beat, I'm not going to say could beat press, but he's a really good route runner. He could play all 3 positions. He could return punts. But what they learned very quickly in practice that he would not go over the middle with any type of courage. And that's kind of a freaking deal breaker on the 49ers, consider it seems like 80% of the routes you run are in breakers.
Well, I mean, somebody said it to
Dante
me.
Pettis. Sorry, Dante.
I mean, Dante Pettis, he wasn't tough, but he wasn't fast. It was like, I didn't understand what Dante Pettis did well. I mean, he didn't seem really strong. He didn't seem like he did have kind of like basketball looseness, and
he had
fluidity.
like a wiggle or a finesse to his movement that made it seem like he could become a great route runner, but he wasn't trying to go over the middle or do anything physical. So that didn't work.
No. So do you think they'll go? I mean, I think they need, if they're going to move off of Debo or Aiyuk in the next year, they need probably to get a receiver. I don't know that they need to get a receiver in the first round. Do you believe that they will go receiver in the first round, or what do you ultimately think they'll do in the first round? Because I'm trying to do process of elimination thoughts on it.
I'm trying to think process of elimination. I don't think they're going to go offensive tackle at 31. Only time they've ever taken an offensive lineman in round 1 was McGlinchey, and I believe that they thought he was going to move to left tackle eventually. I don't think they value right tackle enough to take one in round 1. They've done so much work on the D-line already. They could take a linebacker, but I think the wide receivers that are available there are going to be ranked higher than any linebacker they could take at 31. And they could take a DB, but again, they've never taken a DB before round 3 since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have been here. So they took Aiyuk in round 1. They took Debo and Pettis in round 2. They've taken wide receivers high. They need a wide receiver as much as they need pretty much anything. I mean, they don't really have any immediate holes to fill in the starting lineup on either side. So they can say wide receivers a need next year, just like DB is. I can see him doing it.
I could too, because they, they sent a whole contingent of people out to Western Kentucky to look at Malachi Corley. Now, I don't know if they would take him in the first round, but I could see them taking a wide receiver early, like day 1 or day 2. I don't know if he'll be at 31. This is what I've kind of finally, honed in on, and tell me what you think. This is what I think. If you, and who knows? They draft guys sometimes they don't look at. There's years where they didn't even meet with the guy, but they drafted him. There's other times four out of the first 5 guys they picked, they were met with. So it's hard to kind of understand by who they've met with, who they like, and this and that. But to me, I think there's 2 plans. I think there's one plan is, and I don't know if it's to trade Aiyuk or if it's to trade, a flurry of picks, but I think one plan is to move up for the Washington offensive lineman Fatanu, just because I think Fatanu, Grant, can play all 5 spots and he's ready to play now. And I don't think, if you ask them right now, I think Shanahan doesn't know which of his offensive linemen he needs to replace. It may be Brendel, it may be Feliciano, it may be Burford, it may be McKivitz, though McKivitz is
Trent Williams. I mean, how many more years are you going to have Trent Williams?
Or Trent Williams. So
like when Joe Staley turned, I want to say 34, they drafted Mike McGlinchey just in case. At what point do you start thinking that way with Trent Williams? Because if he misses half a season, this team is in trouble.
Has Trent Williams regressed? I mean, in the last 2 years, let's say.
Yes. I mean, he wasn't good in the Super Bowl, frankly.
Right.
And he doesn't practice anymore. He doesn't really do training camp anymore. He's going to be 36 in July. Yeah. He's still really good though.
Yeah, I mean, he's still a top tier guy, but is he like the best going? I don't know. I just think that Fatanu is the guy that can play left tackle, left guard, right guard. I mean, I don't know about center, but he can play those other 4 spots for sure. And I think he's ready to play right now. And also he's kind of athletic and can pick off guys in space down the field. So I think Fatanu is the offensive tackle they want. But they can't get him at 31. So I think they're either going to trade Aiyuk on draft day for a pick in the teens, maybe with Jacksonville. The trade that I think makes sense, and I wouldn't trade Aiyuk because I think it doesn't make sense in my mind to trade Aiyuk in the middle of you're going for it year, and I think they're in that year this year. But I could see John Lynch went to Stanford, probably likes Walker Little. He's not starting with the Jaguars. Maybe you could get Walker Little in the 17th pick for Aiyuk. To me, that seems relatively fair, even though that seems a little higher than what other receivers went for, but there's reasons for that. He's going into his prime. And then take Fatanu, and you get Walker Little and Fatanu. You get a guy who can play, guards, tackle at left tackle or right tackle. If you lose Trent, he can slide in for McKivitz if you want, and you get Fatanu, the most ready guy. You get 2 offensive linemen. I could see them kind of replenishing their O-line that way. What would you think of that? Could you see Trent Baalke pulling the trigger on a deal for Aiyuk for Walker Little in 17?
Perhaps. I mean, I'm not sure that a team is going to trade that high of a pick for a wide receiver because there are really good wide receivers available that high. I was thinking more along the lines of Washington, because Washington owns the 2nd pick in the draft. They're not going to trade that. They also own 36 and 40. If you combine those, that's the same amount of draft value as like the 13th pick. So I could see them offering a package of 36 and 40 for Aiyuk and maybe a few picks from the Niners or not.
That would be interesting.
That would be interesting because their GM is Adam Peters. So he had a hand in, he knows Brandon Aiyuk very well, as well as anyone in the league. And they can afford to pay him because their quarterback's going to be someone they draft this year.
What do you make of all the back and forth? There was a report by some website saying that there could be basically as soon as Aiyuk unfollowed the Niners, you could see people going, well, there's got to be a trade. This guy wanted to break the trade. He wanted to be Adam Schefter so bad that he put out this, Aiyuk, I don't forget exactly the terms or how he termed it, but basically over the weekend, Aiyuk's agent pushed back and said, no, we're not demanding a trade. And then all the people who don't want Aiyuk traded, it's like, see, he's not going to be traded. It's like, what a circus. It's like, you got to unwrap this thing. Just because the agent said, we haven't demanded a trade does not mean that Brandon Aiyuk will not be traded. But then the other guy, the guy who made the quote, said, hey, man, I'm trying over here and I'm this and that. Well, how about don't try so hard? How about, you follow the Niners, I follow the Niners. We all put out content. You don't see us putting out phantom trades. And it's like, why? Because we don't have sources that told us as much. This guy didn't either, but he decided to just kind of go with it. And then now he's like kind of butthurt because he got some pushback. But I think, what do you make of all this talk? Because to me, I think where there's smoke, there's fire. I think that the Niners are probably very much considering moving Brandon Aiyuk and have a price tag for him. And he probably right now, I would imagine they're at an impasse. They might be able to get it done, but they might not be able to get it done, and he might be moved. What's your read on all of this back and forth between Aiyuk and his cryptic IG notes and his agent's refutal of the report, blah, 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 blah. How do you make sense of it?
It doesn't really seem like Aiyuk's really willing to negotiate with the 49ers. Like maybe he would be willing to play out his 5th-year option and leave. Like it doesn't really seem like he's motivated to come back. And I know it seemed that way with Debo, but Debo has this whole relationship with Kyle Shanahan. They're friends. I don't think Aiyuk has that with Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan was the one that put Aiyuk in the doghouse for a season. So it seems to me like what we're hearing is that if the right package comes along or the right players are available at the right spot, that the Niners could pull the trigger on draft day. And like let's go back to the possibility of it being Washington. Let's say the Niners want to trade Aiyuk to Washington for those 2 second-round picks, but they need to draft a wide receiver to replace Aiyuk in case they do. They might want to wait until they know exactly who's on the board at 31 before they make a trade. Because say they want Adonai Mitchell to replace Aiyuk and he's gone, then they may not want to do the trade, something like that. But if he is there, it's like, okay, we'll take him. You can have Aiyuk. This could be something that happens next Thursday.
It definitely makes you think that how the round shakes out, and if there's a couple key players that fall. I think Fatanu's a guy that if he falls, they may try to trade up. I could see Brock Bowers. I mean, the bottom line is nobody wants to trade anybody, Grant. But if you're going to pay your quarterback 50 times what you're paying him, at least 2 major wage earners on the Niners cap are going to have to be gone. I mean, who's that going to be? My guess it's going to be a receiver.
I mean,
we'll see.
The only other team I can think of that spends big money at quarterback and 2 different wide receiver spots is Cincinnati. And they throw the ball a lot. They don't run the ball very much at all. They ranked 30th in rushing attempts last year. So they're going to be spending big money on Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, presumably, for a while. Okay. They throw the ball a whole hell of a lot. The Niners don't. So I don't understand why they're going to become that team. It seems to me that with Purdy and this offensive philosophy, you spend other places than wide receiver and running back. That just doesn't make sense.
The more I think about the Niners, the more I think, you know what are we even talking about? They're going D-line. They always go D-line.
Yeah.
True. I mean, it's not a Lynch thing. It's like a Niner thing. It's like Niner 3 different Niner regimes have emphasized D-line at the beginning of the draft. It's like an organizational belief or something. Do you think they're satisfied with Malik Collins and Leonard Floyd and Jordan Elliott, or do you think they're going D-line? Because the one thing to me that really stands out is that they brought in this Michael Hall from Ohio State. And the more I watch Michael Hall, the more I think of like a poor man's Bryant Young. He's young. He's 6'3". Is he 320 pounds? No, he's not a sloppy bodied 320. He's like kind of like powerful, explosive, and quick as hell and strong as hell. And he's about 295, and that kind of was Bryant Young. Then at his pro day, he runs 4.76 in Columbus, which makes him the fastest defensive tackle in this year's class. Then when you watch the film, you can see this guy's a leader. He's fiery. He's quick as hell. I see a lot of BY in there. And I personally, I know he's projected to go middle of the second round, maybe even late in the second round. I believe if the Niners sit at 31, they're going to take Michael Hall from Ohio State. And I'm the more every day that goes by, I mean, I'd love a great offensive lineman, a tackle, a center, whatever. But if you said to me, bet on it, I would bet that they would take Michael Hall because I think they view Collins and Jordan Elliott as nice players, but Hall as a star.
Well, I also think they think Malik Collins is probably like a 1-year stopgap, potentially, considering he has 0 guaranteed money on his contract next year, and he's going to be 30. Uh-oh.
Did you freeze?
Sorry, I'm back. I'm here. Did you got me?
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I got you.
My computer freaked out because I looked at Malik Collins' contract on overthecap.com. Shout out to overthecap.com. I just feel like Malik Collins and Leonard Floyd are probably 1-year stopgaps. They're in their 30s. I mean, what are you really expecting from them? And then after them, the Niners like to play 4 defensive linemen in a game. I mean, 8 defensive linemen in a game. They'll go 2 lines, 2 waves. Is Drake Jackson really going to play? Is Kevin Givens really going to play? Like, he can't stop the run. Drake Jackson can't do much of anything. So they have spots to fill in their rotation for sure.
I just think Hall to me seems like their kind of guy. They want one gap penetrators, guys who can play the run but also can get up the field and play the pass. This guy had led the nation this year in pass rush win rate for all college defensive tackles. And then, he didn't work out, and then he did work out at the pro day and ran 4.76 at almost 300 pounds. To me, and for sure he'll be there. I'd be shocked if he wasn't there. I think he's their guy. I'd be surprised. I asked a couple people this question. I'll ask it to you. Is the Niner D-line today, Grant, better or worse than Super Bowl Sunday? Because they lost Armstead, who is clearly better than Collins and Elliott, but they did add Floyd, who's clearly better than Chase Young and Randy Gregory. So is Floyd, Hargrave, Collins, Bosa, Matos, Givens, Elliott, Drake, is this a better D-line than the one they had Super Bowl Sunday, or do you think they still feel like they need to upgrade it?
It feels about the same. But my question is, can they stop the run? They added Malik Collins. They added Leonard Floyd. Can they stop the run? It seems like a D-line of Bosa, Hargrave, Collins, and Leonard Floyd is decidedly weak against the run. So what are they going to do there? Yetur Matos, how much is he even going to play? Same with Jordan Elliott.
Right. Well, and Elliott was like 6th or 7th in the league against the run for defensive tackles. But how much run is he going to get? And how much of that was him? How much was he a dominant run defender as opposed to, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who seemed like made all the tackles in the run game in the playoffs.
Right.
What you mentioned that they don't need anybody to plug in right away. Do you think that means that are you comfortable with Fred Warner and Campbell as the starters at linebacker without Greenlaw? Because is it possible they need a linebacker to start right away?
That's a good point. When I said that, I was thinking, except for maybe linebacker, because I don't feel that comfortable with Devondre Campbell, and I don't think they do either. Otherwise, they wouldn't have tried to sign Eric Kendricks first. So, yeah, if they could get a linebacker at 31, it just doesn't seem like linebacker is going to be the best player available at 31. That's the problem. So,
right,
you could take one in round 2, and maybe he could start right away. I mean, Fred Warner was a 3rd-round pick, and he started right away. Maybe they could do that. But yeah, linebacker would be one. And even if Devondre Campbell is good, like you need a 3rd linebacker until Dre Greenlaw comes back.
Who's the starter in your mind at free safety, or do they need a starting free safety as well? Because they were linked to Budda Baker. Now I don't know if that makes sense on their cap because he makes a ton of money. But I don't think if Budda Baker gets traded this week in draft weekend, I think it's going to be for like a 5th or a 6th round pick. It's not going to be for a high pick because he's 1 year away from free agency and he makes a grip of cash.
Right. I don't think the Niners want to add his contract just because they're having. It'd be one thing it'd be tough to tell Brandon Aiyuk, hey man, we just can't pay you what you want, but we just got Budda Baker. Sorry. Right. I just don't think it's going to happen. To me, Jair Brown, I think is good enough to play either spot. I think he can play free safety, even though he might be built more like a strong safety. He's faster than Talanoa Hufanga, and I think the two of them could form a really excellent duo. I'd like to see it. Of course, they're going to get another safety, but those two I think can fit.
One of the guys that I'm having on the show this week is Sione Vaki, who's from Antioch and is going to be in town this week meeting with the Niners, and his agent contacted me and we're going to meet. And he said, hey, the Niners have met with this guy a bunch. And I'm like, really? Like once or twice? He's like, more like 7 or 8 times. 7 or 8 times meeting with Sione Vaki. What do you think? He would probably he's a running back / safety who I think projects to play safety going forward. What do you think? I mean, could you see the Niners investing some picks in day 3? Because he's probably going to be a day 3 guy. Round 5, round 6. That would be my guess. Can you see the Niners going safety at that point?
Round 5 is generally where the Niners take DBs. They've some exceptions like Jair Brown, Ambry Thomas, Akella Witherspoon. Round 3, everyone else, Diamador Lenore, Talanoa Hufanga. It seemed like Samuel Womack, Darrell Luter Jr. It seems like round 5 is where the Niners like to feel they can get scheme fits. Guys who may not necessarily have whatever it takes to be a first or second round pick and fit everything. But guys who can play zone, guys who can hit, I think they've had a lot of success in round 5. I could see that. That would make sense. I mean, they take a DB in round 5 every year, almost.
Yeah. But I mean, I just look at I like Jair Brown a lot, and I like Hufanga when he's healthy.
Mhm.
But man, I mean, the guys behind those guys. I mean, George Odom's a terrific special teamer, but he's not a from scrimmage safety. And then you got nothing else. Eric Harris, great kid, great story. Taylor Hawkins, good corner at San Diego State. But I mean, those guys are not necessarily guys you want to be leaning on. So they're pretty thin at safety, and that's kind of a physical position where guys go down all the time. So I wouldn't surprise me if they
left and right
a couple safeties.
Sorry, they have been looking at safeties left and right in free agency. So they've tipped their hand that they're interested.
No question. One of the I'm not sure if since we last talked, the Niners signed Rock Ya-Sin, the 28-year-old corner, played at Temple, Ravens last year, Raiders, Colts, I believe, out of the draft. And I was just reading the details on his contract. His contract's worth 1.15 million cap number. He's got $25,000 workout bonus, $985,000 guaranteed, which is not a huge guarantee. But if the Niners decide they want to cut Rock Ya-Sin, they're paying over $1 million to cut him, which kind of speaks like he's going to be on the roster. Not necessarily. Nate Sudfeld was due $3 million. They cut him. But you don't sign a guy in April that you're going to cut in June or July and cost you $1 million. It looks like they're projecting Rock Ya-Sin to make the roster. What do you think of that addition? Some people feel like, it's a great addition and he's got a lot of talent and some upside. He's not old. Other people say, you know what? He's done. He's hurt all the time. He's not going to make the team. Where are you on Rock Ya-Sin?
He's never been cut before, right? He was a second-round pick. He was drafted ahead of Debo. He got traded for Yannick Ngakoue, who's a hell of a player. Then he got hurt. And because he got hurt, he signed a 1-year deal for $6 million, which isn't chump change, with Baltimore, an elite organization that clearly thought he had some value, skills. He was still hurt last year and he didn't play much. So if his knee is cool, it'll be a nice addition. If not, he's probably done. And they might have to eat the $1 million. So we'll see. I don't really know. Knee injuries don't really end up working out so well for the 49ers, but we'll see.
I mean, I'll say this for the Niners. They have a lot of depth at corner. They really do. They got a lot of guys. I don't know if they're super thin at safety, but they're super loaded at corner. But they don't necessarily have that number one corner. But they sure have a bunch of guys. Isaac Yiadom, and they brought in Chase Lucas, and they brought in Rock Ya-Sin, and there's Womack, there's Luter, there's Lenore, there's Mooney. They've got bodies at corner for sure.
They do, absolutely. And again, they're not going to be playing a ton of man-to-man coverage. It's zone. You're not asking that much from your corners. You're asking them to tackle. That's important. So I could see the Niners acting like, we have 5 bodies here. Someone should be good enough to be the third corner on our team, someone who plays 600 snaps. I mean, could be Ambry. He's had moments. Why am I laughing?
I didn't even mention Ambry.
He's had moments.
He's had he didn't his interception seal a playoff win one year?
It's true. It absolutely did. Well, I would think it was week 18.
I personally think that putting Ambry in the lineup for Oliver was one of the best moves that helped them last year. It just, he was quite a bit better
pick when Oliver. He was covering DK Metcalf in Seattle. That was a nice play. Maybe this is the year he puts it all together. I mean, look at Akello Witherspoon. He was never really good enough for the Niners, and this past year for the Rams, he was good. He was like their Diamador Lenore. He was a good player. Good number 2 corner.
I got to throw a question that I got at a high school baseball game the other day. Somebody came up to me and said, "Hey man, I love the show. I love the stream. I watch you with Grant."
Nice.
Like, thanks, man. Appreciate you. He's like, I got one real question. He's like, is Lynch good at drafting, or was it Peters? And I looked him in the eye and I'm like, bro, I have no idea. I really don't.
How do
I
you explain
don't
the last
know.
two drafts? Peters and Lynch were on the team, and neither of the last two drafts were particularly good. If you take out Purdy and Jair Brown, like two players in two drafts.
Well, and then from what I heard, and I don't know that it's true, but somebody said that Peters was the guy who banged the table to draft Ambry Thomas. I don't know if that's
I've
true.
heard that too, but I didn't hear it directly from anyone who I don't know. But I've heard that
You
rumor.
haven't
Yes,
verified it.
I've heard. I mean, he also. I mean, yeah. I mean, I would imagine that they all have their batting average, and none of them are perfect.
But like he asked me that question. I'm like, dude, I feel like I could answer almost any Niner question, but I have no idea. I have no idea.
No.
What's your sense of it, though? I mean, you're as close to the Niners as anybody. What's your sense of it? I mean, I asked Corey to interview Peters like 5 times, and 5 times he's like, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll get back to you on that." And then it just never happened. So I have no idea. Peters, for all I know, can't walk and chew gum at the same time, or Peters could be, the greatest personnel man that ever walked the earth. I really don't know, because I don't know. We're not in their room. We don't know who's banging the table for who, or who knows what, or who knows what. We don't know.
Here's the way I look at it. Here's the way I look at it. Probably what happened was Peters did a ton of homework. He'd watch all the players. You know what I mean? He'd go scout. He's a scout. So he would do all the homework. He'd know these guys for years. And then he would sort of give, I would guess, John Lynch the answers to the cliff notes beforehand. Here's 100 players to watch. Here's 100 players I think you should watch, John. And then John would watch them, and he would have opinions and make decisions, and maybe Kyle too, in the first few rounds. But once it got past those 100 players, probably Adam would take over and say, okay, like, I've still heard of guys on the board. John, have you heard of these guys? Kyle, have you heard of these guys? No. Okay, doesn't that make sense? Kind of. John and Kyle want to make decisions, but they don't have time to know all these players the way a real scout would.
There is a strong, whatever you want, contrast between the Niners' success rate trading up. They've traded up for some terrible players, and often day 1 and day 2 players outside of Bosa and Debo, and there's a lot of misses there. But man, day 3, you could argue that whoever's making the day 3 picks has saving their bacon. Kittle, Fonga, Purdy, DJ Jones, others.
Yep. Lenore.
Is it the same people? You know what I mean? Is it the same person, or do they get to the middle rounds and they get to day 3 and they're like, hey, we're going to lean on our scouts? For all I know, they're leaning on their scouts on day 3, and day 1 and day 2, it's like guys that Kyle and the coaching staff fell in love with. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And they double
that.
up at positions, right? Like last year, they took Cam Latu, and everyone was like, well, where did that come from? Why did they like Cam Latu so much? And then a couple rounds later, they take Braden Willis. It's like, well, why'd you need 2 tight ends? What are you talking about? Maybe it's like Kyle had his pick, and then the front office had their pick, and they're like, all right, why don't we just get both and see how it goes?
We'll clean up. We'll clean up for the head coach.
Same thing with Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell. Same draft.
Head coach loved Joe Williams. They traded up for Dante Pettis. They love Jalen Hurd.
Jalen Hurd.
There's lots of these offensive busts that
Danny Gray, and the story behind Danny Gray. Do you remember the story behind Danny Gray? Do you remember the story?
Sermon. What's that?
Do you remember the story about how Kyle Shanahan discovered Danny Gray? He said this on the record. He said he was in Cabo and he ran into Sonny Dykes, who happened to tell him, like, well, they were like in line at a buffet or something. Hey, Danny Gray's good. And Kyle was like, thanks for the tip. On the record. Thank you, Sonny.
Should have ordered another pina colada and said, forgotten that name. So it's like Trent Baalke. I wrote AJ Jenkins' name down in an envelope.
I was in the room when he said it. When he said it.
I mean, talk about a guy trying to channel his inner Sonny Weaver.
The question was, do you know who you're going to take? They had the 31st pick. Do you know who you're going to take at pick 31? And he goes, oh, yeah. I got the name written down in an envelope. And I was thinking, I wasn't that old at the time, but I was thinking, if you're that certain he's going to be available at 31, why do you want him so much? Why are you this smug? You're that certain no one else wants him, but you do.
All I know is if you're going to say I wrote the guy's name down in an envelope, that guy sure as hell better be freaking great.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you look like a total loser.
As I mean, it was like one of the worst picks ever. He caught no passes for the 49ers, not one.
Hey, Trent, I wrote down in an envelope that Marcus Lattimore blew out his knee and was never going to play again, and you drafted him in the 4th round.
Yeah, that wasn't great.
That
wasn't great. That wasn't great.
If a guy gets hit by a car, Trent Baalke's like, hey, value. I see value. Everybody else is like, oh, he's done. Trent's like, I got to have that guy. All right, couple more here. One I think is kind of interesting. There's an article out by David Bonilla on 49er Web Zone, and it's entitled Brock Purdy Sends Clear Message to Brandon Aiyuk Amid Contract Talks with the 49ers. And so the story plays on 49er Web Zone like, Purdy backed his guy. And, when you hear that, you're thinking the clear message is, hey, that's my best receiver. That's my go-to guy. I want him here. By hook or by crook, I love him, I need him, and I want him. You know what I mean? Something along those lines I thought I was going to read. Then I go down to the quote, and here's the quote. And it's from Cam Inman. Cam Inman talked to Brock Purdy there was a little kid's camp, and he went up to him and asked him about Aiyuk. And this is what Purdy said. And tell me what your takeaway is on this. He says, we've talked. I just told him, we've being Purdy and Aiyuk. We've talked. I just told him I'll always have his back and support him in whatever he does. I want the best for him. It's a business thing. So for me to say anything about that, that's out of my pay grade. He and I talk through things and I hear him out. At the end of the day, what he's done for me, giving me an opportunity to come in and throw him the ball, I'll always be thankful for that.
Hey, that's about as clear as mud.
Yeah, that's not clear.
That's but about as clear as mud. What are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that he's not coming back? That sounded ominous.
It does.
I really cherish my time together with Brandon, and I always be grateful, and I always remember, and I can't what?
If I came up to you in the 49er press room and said, Grant, you know what? I'll always remember what you did for me, helping me get on YouTube. You would be like, oh, Larry's moving to Florida.
Are you going somewhere?
Yeah.
Did you get in trouble? Did you get sick? Are you leaving? What's up?
Yeah. Are you going to prison? Is this it? Yeah.
What happened, man? Are you going to give me your stereo next? Like, what are you talking about?
I mean, that sounds to me
bad.
Like a guy like Brock Purdy knows there's a very good chance that he's never going to play with Brandon Aiyuk again. And he wanted to let him know what he meant to his career. That didn't sound like he's going to be here. I absolutely stood behind him. It
sounded like he said, "Look, I don't know what's going to happen with Brandon Aiyuk, but I'm prepared for him to leave." Now he did say, "I talked to Brandon, and we can you say that part of it? I talked to Brandon, and we discussed things."
He said. We've talked. I just told him I'll always have his back and support him in whatever he does. I want the best for him. It's a business thing for me to say anything about that, that's out of my pay grade. He and I talk through things, and I hear him out at the end of the day. What he's done for me, giving me an opportunity to come in and throw him the ball, I'll always be thankful for that.
That's terrible. We talked, and I can't really talk about it, but yeah, it sounds awful. It sounds like, not awful. It sounds like it's a done deal. Ooh, boy. So maybe when he unfollowed the Niners, it's because he been talking to another team and it's getting somewhat official, and who knows. But yeah, it doesn't sound good.
That does not sound like Brandon Aiyuk's coming back. To me. But it wasn't like that. If it was clear, it would have been like, hey, I need you. I can't do this without you. And I expressed that to Lynch. That's a clear message, right? I mean, that would be like the Brock Purdy clear message. I gotta have you, man. You're my guy across the middle. You're the guy that I hook up with the most. And I told John and Kyle that. That's a clear message. This is like, hey, man, I appreciate you no matter what happens from here on out. I mean, like you could be gone tomorrow. At least to me, I don't know. To me,
I got a theory.
That's what is it?
Robert Prado just pointed it out. He says, I got quiet once the Niners told him they'll trade on one of his desired locations. What if they're working and they've determined that they're not going to be able to give Aiyuk what he wants, and they will, out of courtesy to him, explore deals to see if another team would give him what they want. And maybe they have a couple of offers that they kind of like, but they don't want the rest of the league to know that. And that's maybe why the agent was so quick to like shut this down, because maybe the Niners have some deals that don't include first round picks, but multiple twos, and they need to see who's there at 31 first, or they don't want teams to know. How about that? They don't want teams to know right now that they're in the market for a wide receiver in round 1. That's their secret, because they haven't traded Aiyuk yet. So they can sort of work covertly, be a dark horse there. I don't know.
Well, there's also, they may feel like one of these, like Trent Baalke. Trent Baalke, I mean, let's look at Jacksonville. They were riding high. The Niners went in there, beat them. Then they sunk like a stone. And what did they do to react to it? They fired their entire defensive staff. Well, guess what? Guess who's getting it next? It's not going to be Doug Peterson wearing the Super Bowl ring. They're not going to blame Trevor Lawrence, Mr. Quarterback, face of the franchise. They're going to blame Trent Baalke. Trent Baalke's gone next. So I think, if let's say Jacksonville needs a receiver and they're looking at Brian Thomas from LSU, he might even be better than Aiyuk over time. It's not going to be better than Aiyuk next year, though. And if you're Trent Baalke, I mean, let's be honest, and I know Trent Baalke well enough to know he's a survivor, and he will do what he needs to do to keep those NFL paychecks coming in. And if the Jaguars miss the playoffs this year, Trent Baalke is getting fired. I'm pretty confident of that. So I think Jacksonville's the team at 17 that's going to say, you know what? We want Aiyuk. We want Aiyuk, and yeah, we'll give you Aiyuk, we'll give you Walker Little, and we'll give you a 3rd-round pick. And maybe the Niners are just waiting until they see if Fatanu or some receiver or the tight end from Georgia or somebody that they really, really like is there at 17, and maybe they'll do it. But I think Trent Baalke wants to win next year, because if he doesn't win, he thinks he'll be fired. I think he's all about himself.
And this is why I feel that Aiyuk is going to get traded, because I think Jacksonville's interested. I think Pittsburgh's interested. I think the Chargers should be interested. How could Washington not be interested? Again, they have Adam Peters. They're going to be drafting a quarterback. Why would you not want to give him the best wide receivers possible, so to give him the best chance to succeed? It seems like there's at least 3 or 4 teams that would be interested. And if that's the case, then he's probably gone.
Yeah. Yeah. This is another one I got to get your thoughts on. This is just amazingly stupid. Now, granted, this is an anonymous NFL executive speaking.
Real quick, before we move on, just before I had a thought, and then we'll move on.
Go ahead.
If the Niners granted, like Eric Armstead politely said, "Could you please release me?" And the Niners did, because they want to be seen as the player-friendly team. So if Brandon Aiyuk,
that's important. Guys, that's important to the other players.
Look, guys, I don't want to negotiate with you. I don't want to be on this team anymore. I don't want to be the 4th option in a run-first team. I'd rather leave. Would you please look for a trade for me? I mean, the Niners have kind of established that they're the team that will. They're not going to hold a player against his will. Look what they did with Armstead.
People ask me too. It's like, how do you feel about an Aiyuk trade? Well, I don't love it, because the Niners are in their win now mode. But at the same time, you're paying your quarterback 50 times what you're paying him. Some big time guys are going to have to go. If you're asking me who's easier to replace, Trent Williams or George Kittle or a receiver, every year in the draft, you could sign Tyler Boyd tomorrow.
Yeah.
And Tyler Boyd could have comparable numbers if you throw him the ball to Aiyuk. I mean, Ayuk's better. We all know that, but Tyler Boyd's pretty damn good. So, and there's good receivers in this draft and in mid rounds even. So, I think Aiyuk could be replacing the wide receiver is easier than replacing some of these other positions.
I mean, when the question came down, like, should you pay Nick Bosa? There was never like an issue of, well, will you use him enough to justify the contract? Like, yeah, you're going to use him enough. I mean, if he continues to get 18 sacks a season, then yeah, it's worth it. But with Aiyuk, it's different. Are you going to give him the ball enough to justify paying him what he's worth? No, no. The answer is no. And can you afford him and Debo and Purdy? Absolutely not. So what are you going to do?
Here's the question. The Niners threw 3 passes to Aiyuk in all 3 playoff games. Why? Why? Why did they throw him 3 passes? Why did he have 3 catches in those
Yeah,
games?
because he's
And is
not
that going to
a
dramatically
featured.
change in the future?
No, it should have happened already. He was, I mean, the number one target in the regular season, but when it came to playoff games, Kyle Shanahan didn't trust him anymore. I mean, I think if you look in targets, he might have been fourth or fifth. Let me look that up. Let me look that up real quick. I know it's
And people also, we get, you and I get a lot of the, hey, they said this, they said that. They said in late July they loved Trey Lance and traded him for a 4th-round pick like a week later. You know what I mean?
that's true.
Nobody's ever going to no smart executive's ever going to verbally devalue an asset that they're trying to move. So they're always going to say, he's our guy. We love him. Like, do you get this? Because I get this all the time. Lynch says he loves him. Lynch says that, they really, it's like, really? Are we going there that, you don't, contract talks 101 and how you deal with players. You're going to say you love the player right up until even beyond. They said they loved Trey Lance after they traded him. They're going to say they love Aiyuk after they trade him. If they trade him.
Aiyuk had 9 catches in the postseason. Juwan Jennings had 10. Debo had 13. McCaffrey had 19. And it's interesting. So Brandon really didn't do much in the playoffs. He had that big catch. You take away that huge catch he had against Detroit that bounced off the defender's face. I mean, it was like the luckiest play of all time.
Right.
He had 8 catches for less than 100 yards in the playoffs. Aiyuk.
In 3 playoff games, you mean?
In 3 playoff games. And what's crazy is, who else was right down there in production? Kittle. 8 catches, 112. No one talks about Kittle because he's older and he's a good blocker, but in the playoffs, he does nothing as a receiver. Nothing.
I think you're going to see the Niners go after a top-tier tight end blocker so that they can use Kittle more as a receiver.
They need
if they
to
move off of Aiyuk.
They need to. I always want to give Kittle the benefit of the doubt with that one, because I feel like if he were on a different team, like if you took Travis Kelce off the Chiefs and put Kittle on the team, he would have 80 catches, 90 catches in a season.
None of this dialogue is providing any answers, but we are talking it through, and the more you talk it through, the more it seems like they're just. I would say, if you said to me, give me some odds, I would say 65-35 he gets traded. I think
so. I mean, when you read Purdy's quote, that sounded terrible.
Did not.
It just sounded really bad. I've talked to Aiyuk and yada 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 yada. He could have said, "I've talked to Aiyuk and I don't want to speak on him, but like just be patient and these things work themselves out." He could have said that, but he didn't.
Right. I'll always support you.
It's a business,
and I'll never. If I come up to you and go, Grant, I'll never forget what you did for me. That does not reek of, hey, we'll see you next week. That's
it doesn't. It's are we done?
I'm moving to Georgia.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm never going to see you again. I'll never forget what you did for me. That's kind of what that sounded like.
Yeah. So again, my best guess is the Niners have some offers. It's probably closer to happening than people realize. Doesn't mean that it's a done deal though. And it may be contingent on certain things. Things can happen. There's a week and a half left. But I think probably get mentally prepared for him not to be on this team in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. No, seriously. And I think it's gonna bother a lot of people because you quickly see the same things I see. They should trade Debo instead. Okay. That's pie in the sky. He's not worth the same. It's like they should have traded Armstead instead of Buckner. Well, of course, but there was no market for Armstead. There's a market for Buckner. There's a market for Aiyuk. There is no market, for Debo.
And what also is going to hurt is when he gets traded to another team and they pay him all that money, then they're going to be committed to giving him the ball. So his numbers will be crazy. I would imagine if he stays healthy, he's going to be catching 100 passes a season instead of 70 and putting up 1,600 yards a season instead of 13. It's okay. Because the Niners are probably going to draft a wide receiver who's really good too. That's the one thing. I think Kyle could pick a good wide receiver at this point. He got the Jalen Hurds and Dante Pettis out of his system in the last few times. Danny Ware notwithstanding, he's been pretty good. Yeah, I even like Ronnie Bell.
I like Ronnie Bell too. But here's the thing. I'm not going to rip the Niners if they trade Brandon Aiyuk. But I am going to rip the Niners if they trade Brandon Aiyuk to the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And the Chiefs are one of the teams. I mean, I know
No,
it sounds
I'm
like
with you on
laughable.
that.
I
I'm
know
with
it
you on
sounds
that.
laughable, but the Chiefs are one of the teams that badly wants a wide receiver. And if the Niners trade Brandon Aiyuk to the Chiefs, that's the Charles Haley all over again.
I completely agree, because talk about teams that could take full advantage of Brandon Aiyuk. That's one of them. Buffalo would be another one.
Imagine losing a Super Bowl to Brandon Aiyuk, going up top from Mahomes.
That's why you want to trade him somewhere like New England.
Right.
Trade him to the Patriots. You'll never have to worry about him ever again.
Right. You'll be like, you'll hear about him on SportsCenter a lot, but you won't see him in the playoffs. He'll never burn you.
Nope.
Patriots. Patriots. Supposedly the Steelers badly want him. Jaguars.
Chargers.
Somebody in the AFC.
You think Harbaugh would pull the trigger on that?
Yeah, he might. He might. Because one thing about Jim wants to win the Super Bowl next year.
Now.
Yeah, he's not,
he's not the quarterback to do it.
He doesn't have a 3-year, 5-year plan.
I respect that about him.
I do too.
He's a lot different than he was when he was the Niners head coach. He's mellowed out a little bit, enough. He's interesting.
He
was
coach.
Kind of insufferable when he was 50 years old, but now at 60, he's really endearing.
I blame Jim Harbaugh more for losing to the Ravens than I blame Kyle Shanahan for losing 2 to the Chiefs. Because you know why? Because I was there, and the Ravens were old and they were dangling by a thread. They could not stop the run, and he called a timeout coming out of a 2-minute warning.
They also got their asses kicked until the power went out. That was a weird game. It allowed them to regroup. They were not prepared. They were decidedly not prepared for that game.
And you didn't hand it to Frank Gore, and you did hand it to LaMichael James on the doorstep with everything on the line.
I have a feeling he's improved as a coach, though. But maybe I don't know. Maybe that's just because
he's not an offensive guru. He's not a guru. He's Bo Schembechler, but he's a damn good coach, and he hires damn good coaches.
He's a lot like John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh isn't necessarily a guru of either side of the ball, but he's a hell of a head coach. And Jim might be even better.
John does seem a little bit more in control of his emotions, where Jim seems like, Jim was wasting timeouts. Jim had a screwed up situation.
What I want to say is I think Jim is more in control of his emotions now than he was 10 years ago.
Yeah, probably.
I think he is.
Probably.
Yeah. He's 60. You mellow out a little bit. Not that I can speak from experience, but my dad did. I noticed it right away.
Seriously. I think everybody mellows in time. Yeah. All right, here we go. Here's the topic we got to hit. Former NFL executive goes on the former NFL executive, anonymous NFL executive, told NFL Analysis Network, never heard of that. This is the most baffling. This is an unbelievably awesome, quote. He goes, Brock Purdy is one of the most talented arms that I've seen. However, I think he needs to find more fire. I want to see him get amped on the field. That's a big reason for him to become a legitimate, great quarterback. Okay. Talk about a guy who has gotten this wrong. Nobody loves Brock Purdy more than me, Grant. Nobody. You don't see me saying he's the most talented arm I've ever seen.
It's like he's like, look, we know he's got the size, we know he's got the arm strength, but is he smart enough? It's like, what? Who are we talking about? Are we talking about Brock Purdy? What?
Could you imagine if we started a stream anytime in the last year and I'm like, look, we're talking about one of the great arms in NFL history. It's like, what? No, he's got enough arm, but it's not one of the great arms.
Yeah,
it's pretty accurate. But he needs to get fired up. To me, this guy, there's somebody who's evaluating just the presser. If you just watch the presser and you see him go, oh shucks, and and he's very kind of quiet and understated and sometimes a little low energy and he's introspective, but he's not fiery, then you would say that. But if you talk to the players, if you see him on the practice field, if you see him in the games, he's got plenty of fire, and the arm strength and the arm talent is enough. And this guy's like, he's got one of the great arms, but he needs to get fired up.
I think it's interesting because fired up is such an arbitrary thing, but like we're talking about demeanor on a football field for a quarterback. And one of the things I like about Brock is his demeanor because it's the kind of position where you can sort of like feel the player's anxiety if he has it through the television. Like with Jimmy, you could feel it. Like the guy is anxious as the play goes on.
You can see the feet too. He
You
starts
can
to pitter
see it. I mean,
patter.
even Jeff Garcia and Steve Young, great quarterbacks, played with a bit of like a frenetic anxiety. And I think one thing that stands out about Brock the more you watch him is he has like a coolness. And that's why certain people will compare him at times to Joe Montana. Obviously, he's not Joe Montana and may never will be because he's the greatest of all time. But there's a coolness and a composure that is rare at that position, especially for young players, really for anyone that may be an intrinsic quality that he has. It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Like he's almost bored sometimes. Aaron Rodgers had that. It's a good quality considering how anxiety producing it must be.
He's very, very composed.
Yep.
But look at the fire. I mean, talk to the guys. I mean, we get a chance to go talk to the players. The players will say it. Oh, Brock's fired up. Brock's, that he's not like one of these low energy guys on the field.
He celebrates.
I mean,
he's pointing at he's doing this. I mean,
do you remember the Ray thing where Ray should have cut out and should have cut in and he cut out and he kind of freelanced it and Brock just lit him up. And I asked him about it at the presser. I'm like, what did you say to Ray? And he's like, he kind of admitted that he verbally lit him up, but that they have a good relationship. So I mean, it's crazy. People, I mean, that one made me laugh.
I mean, the whole thing with Brock Purdy is when he first took over, someone like I guess one of the vets was talking too much, or whether in the huddle might have been
I think it might have been Ray.
Could have been Ray, could have been Kittle. I don't know who it was. Kittle told the story, but Purdy just kind of without thinking, as a reaction, just told the guy to shut the hell up, which is what you have to do, and he did it.
Last one before we read a couple supers and get out.
Yeah.
Brandon Staley, got a chance to look at him the other day at the pro day, and he was just walking around. And Grant, what's your guess on Brandon Staley? Because I mean, the worst thing that you could do for Nick Sorensen is take a guy who's been a successful defensive coordinator and a head coach, not necessarily a successful head coach, but a successful defensive coordinator, and just have him staring over the shoulder of Nick Sorensen in his first year as the coordinator. So he's probably, Kyle made the point. Hey, it's Nick's game, Nick's ball game. He's calling the D. He's making all the calls. What do you actually think Brandon Staley is going to do or is doing right now for the Niners?
To me, it's Staley's defense. I don't know. Look, I'm not there. I don't want to spread misinformation, but the way I see it is if Kyle Shanahan had more power, if Kyle Shanahan had more standing on his team, if some of those players on his defense weren't so freaking powerful and highly paid, Brandon Staley would be the defensive coordinator of this team. I think that's Kyle's choice. I think it's the front office's choice. But the players just rejected their last choice, Steve Wilks. I think that's pretty clear. I don't think the players ever bought into Steve Wilks. They saw him as an outsider, and I think it would have been real dangerous to bring in another outsider to replace Wilks when the players clearly want someone they know, someone who's not really someone they know, and someone who will keep things the same. I think Kyle wants to change on defense. He brings in a guy whose background is the 3-4. How about that? So I think this is sort of a nod to the players like, look, I lost the Super Bowl. I didn't know the rules. It's my fault. I know you're pissed at me, so I'll elevate your guy. But in the back door comes Brandon Staley, and you're not going to have to really worry about what he's doing. But guess who's drawing up the pressures? Guess who's drawing up the cover schemes? Like Staley. And he's going to help Sorensen, who's going to call the plays. That's the way I see it.
Somebody says, is Wilkes still unemployed? As far as I know, he is. I haven't heard.
When you get fired that late in the process, it's hard to get another job. Yeah. He could take a year off.
He'll probably, he'll be a consultant or a college defensive coordinator, or maybe he'll take a year off. Maybe he's getting paid.
Yeah.
Ken says Aiyuk showed up to non-mandatory workouts today, guys. Yeah, I mean, Aiyuk is going forward like, hey, I want to be here, and the Niners are going to go forward like, hey, we want you here. But believe me, we all know there's a number, and Parag Marate knows what it is. And if it's an impasse and the right situation comes up, they'll move off. And I think you heard that from Brock Purdy. All right, let's hit some supers and we'll bolt. Fish and Chips is another going for it year, Larry. Let's get real. No. What's he saying? He's saying that they're not going to go for it. They are going for it, but he means he doesn't think they're going to get it. Maybe, I don't know. What's your interpretation?
He's not a big Kyle Shanahan guy, so I think he's feeling a little like it doesn't matter at this point. And I understand that kind of cynicism at this point. Like, Kyle, you're supposed to be that guy. Yeah. How good of a team do you need before you can seal the deal? Yeah. You just had a great team.
Until Kyle proves that he's not going to shoot himself in the foot in big moments, there's going to be people who are like, hey, man, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot in big moments. And Fish and Chips is probably in that category. Fish and Chips says, just trade Aiyuk. No room for being sentimental. Well, I agree there's no room for being sentimental, but it's also you better get your deal because this is a hell of a player.
Don't lose that trade.
Yeah, do not trade him to the Chiefs or I mean, I seriously I will openly rip that. I don't care if they get 2 number ones. You cannot trade him to the Kansas City Chiefs and say you're going for it. You just can't. Rev Russ says trade Debo and his salary, pay Aiyuk what he's worth, draft a tackle in round 1 and a center in round 2. Okay. Ray Russ. Rev Russ. Rev Russ says trade Debo. I just got that one. Gregorius Greg says, love the show. What boneheaded, surprising pick are my 49ers going to make this year since we already have our great kicker? Well, they drafted a punter in the 4th. They drafted a kicker in the 3rd. Maybe a backup quarterback in the 2nd.
It's going to be the running back in round 3. But if it's Blake Corum, I won't be mad. I won't be mad if it's Blake Corum. He's a good player.
If it's Blake Corum,
they won't take Blake Corum. They'll take someone preposterous.
Yeah. I could see Stanford have anybody in the draft? I could see Stanford. Maybe Stanford.
Are they going to take one of the legacy players? Are they going to take Jerry Rice's kid or McCaffrey's brother? They can take McCaffrey's brother.
Brandon Aiyuk to the Jaguars for Walker Little and a 3rd round pick. Something like that, where you're like, what? No. Khalil Kemp says Kyle's been chomping at the bit to replace Brandon with Ladd McConkey. I hope not. Ladd McConkey scored 2 touchdowns all of last year.
2.
So two. Like 2. Grant's 1, I'm 2. There's 2 of us. There's 2 touchdowns. Ladd McConkey, 2 touchdowns. He ran fast, but no. If the 49ers get a Percy Robinson, if 49ers get a first rounder for Brandon Aiyuk, would you package both of them picks to move up to get Brock Bowers and then get the Xavier Legette in the 2nd from South Carolina and maybe sign Tyler Boyd? I'll say this, Brock Bowers is awesome. And Brock Bowers, if you're going to move off of George Kittle in a year, you're probably going to need somebody like Brock Bowers to make the fan base be okay with that. And that's not crazy. I'll say that. That's not crazy talk. It's not a I read that one. Fish and Chips. If Kyle and Staley's show, Kyle and Staley's show will be full of anxiety.
I do feel like Staley's a lot like Kyle in terms of temperament. Smart, not necessarily galvanizing. I Kyle almost makes fun of that, but D'Amico's galvanizing. Robert Saleh's galvanizing. Harbaugh's galvanizing. I think someone on your staff or prominent on your team needs to have that effect on people, and Purdy does. One of the things we like about him, he's a galvanizing leader.
Papa Phil says, fire Kyle already. Oh, I don't know about that. But you know what? Eventually you got to get it done. Nobody lasts forever. That's for sure. Grant, what do you got cooking the rest of the day? You done for the day? You streaming more later today? How's your?
Hey, if they trade Brandon Aiyuk at 5, I'm streaming at 6. I'll say that. But save that. I think I'm done until tomorrow morning when I'm doing the Cohn Zone with my dad.
Nice. Tell him I said hi.
Yeah.
All right. That's going to do it for us. Thanks to all of you guys. Thanks to Grant. Thanks to all of you guys in the chat. And have a great day. Thanks for watching the Krueger Show. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you won't